we find absolutely uncertain. How long does my family last? How long does my marriage last? How long does my job last? How long do my friendships last? How long will I have the amount of money that I have? So all these factors that are now, you know, ephemeris are very big obstacles to reassure our roles as teachers and to know what is best, what is next and what is best. What should we aim to? So the first thing that I want to confess to you all is that everything that we do in education is a test. Everything that we do is kind of like a trial version. Anybody that tells you that they know exactly what's going to work, to motivate, to take our students to their best potential, everybody who tells you that they are sure about how to do that, they're lying. And I think that's one of the most interesting things about working in education. We need to work without being sure what's the best thing to do. And I think in teacher's vocation, there's a very usual attitude that is to have longing for innovation, to have longing for the next thing, the next new thing. To have longing means to desire the next new thing. But when that next new thing comes and it tells you, well, this is the next new thing, but to do this next new thing, you will have to do this, you'll have to learn this, and you will have to do these extra works. Well, then teachers start like looking at each other and say, well, I don't know if I want the new thing. I think I prefer the old thing. I think I'm comfortable with the old thing. That's what I like to call the halfway hero dilemma. Because we kind of like to feel as if we were heroes in a way. And we are. We do very difficult things in very harsh conditions. And we work out some miracles in our careers, and that's something to be proud of. But when it comes to innovation, a name that suits us better is halfway hero dilemma, because innovation is difficult, it takes time. So the first thing I think Vivadí asks from the schools that are our partners and from the teacher that are also our partners that work with us, trying to install Vivadí in our children's minds, is to lose your comfortness. Is to start mourning, hacer el dolo, start mourning the loss of our comfort and the loss of predictability. Because only when we get out of our safe space, we're going to be able to take our students off of their safe space. And only when we do that, the learning will happen. Because at the end of the day, nothing that is worth doing or living or feeling has an easy path. So the second thing Vivadí asks from you is to know that Vivadí isn't easy, and it's difficult, and it requires a lot of commitment, and it requires some good freaking teachers that know that they can make change happen. We're not really sure how. We can try, but we know that inside us, we have the ability to make that change happen. Because I don't know if you notice, I don't know if you have, immersed yourself in our platform and in our cycles, in our planifications, and the activities. But it's very, very much based on a talented and a gifted teacher. It's very difficult to make Vivadí a systemic program, you know, for the entire country, for example, because most of the activities that we propose in our platform rely on certain type of charisma, certain type of loving perspective, certain type of ability of being funny, for example, or the ability of narrating an interesting story. It's kind of like you need to be interesting to be part of an interesting program. And if you feel you're not, now is the time to turn off the screen. But no, I think you all must be very interesting and daring, and I hope we could do this together, and we could really understand the power that is needed to work and to educate with all the uncertainties that our world proposes. So let's start acknowledging that Vivadí actually doesn't solve problems, because what it basically does is that it creates answers for questions we haven't asked ourselves yet. And that is a big pressure, because we need to find those questions. So let's start with the most basic, childish, and simplistic model of question that our children often explain to us. That is the beautiful question, why? And let's try to ask a bit of whys of how our program works. Let's start with, why does our structure repeat itself? That's a question we've received a lot of times. Why does our structure repeat itself? As if it were like a strange thing in education, as if there weren't other elements of the school that repeats itself. Well, first of all, I have two answers for that. The first answer would be that a lot of things repeat themselves. A lot of learning structure repeat themselves, especially those who involve acquiring certain type of abilities, like, I don't know, driving, for example, juggling, you know, the clown that juggles with the balls, any sport that we have. All of these learning systems are based on repetition, are based on a structure that repeats itself. I think over time, schools have misinterpreted the cognitive conditions that are needed to learn a language. And often, schools think that in order to learn a language, you have to give the language the same treatment you give, for example, social studies. You have to, you know, be diverse in your perspectives. You have to potential critical thinking. But unlike what traditionally we have been doing with our English classrooms, cognitive process in the acquirement of a new language is a much more mechanic and systemic. It's much more mechanic and systemic process than it is a creative process. There is a reason why every child learns their mother tongue, regardless if of their parents have been being creative or critical thinkers or philosophers. They learn the language because they repeated, they engaged in routines in their links with the families, in their problematic situations they had to resolve in everyday life. And those small processes that repeat themselves throughout their lives were the ones that guaranteed the acquisition of a new language. So that would be the first answer. To resume, the cognitive process that is needed to acquire a new language is a mechanic and immersive system and process. That's why we need to repeat certain situations. And that when for example, our children go to, I don't know, capoeira, or go to judo, or go to football, where the aim is also to acquire an ability, because we like our children to understand how judo works, but what we need them to do is to react in a judo manner once they are judo approached. We like our football player to understand how football works, but what we need them to do is to react in a footballistic manner when a footballistic approach is near them. And that is the same with English. We need our children to react in English. And to react in English, we need them to have a repetitive structure that can teach their bodies how to predict an English situation. The second question, I would say, is that our structure in particular, I just talked about structures in general, but our structure in particular, if you take a very deep look at it, has a very interesting mapping of the student's entire selfness. In our structure, we have a beginning and an end, a very pronounced beginning and end with our songs. We have the compulsory assignment for the children to build that beginning and to unbuild that end. We have a moment where they're in silence and they have to talk with their inner selves. We have a moment where they have to express themselves and talk to others. We have a moment where they have to play with others. We have a moment where they have to think with others. We have a moment where they have to think with themselves. We have a moment where they have to connect with their body as their body is still. And we have a moment where they have to connect with their bodies as their bodies are in movement. So with the structure we have planned in deep detail and with a lot of conscientiousness, we have mapped a very important percentage of the student's interaction with him or herself and with the environment he or she lives in. And that is why the repetition, that is why if we repeat our structure, we will be constantly committing our students to be connected with almost every possible interaction they have in life. There are sometimes where they have to interact with peers, and sometimes where they're going to be asked to interact with adults, with authorities. So they have a vertical bonding and they have a horizontal bonding. So almost every type of interaction with one's being and with one's environment that is included in the structure we have deeply planned for you guys. Second question I've been asked many times. Why, okay, some gestores or professores ask, okay, I understand why you repeat the structure, but why do you repeat the activities for an entire month? Okay, I understand that it's much more it's much easier to explain the answer than to actually take it through as a teacher. Believe me, I've tried. And it's not easy to engage your students into repeating an activity. And it's more difficult when they get older. But there's a couple of things, very interesting things that happen. I've used this analogy before. In Brazil, as I've been told, it happens a lot that in order to really learn proper English or to acquire it and to, you know, being able to have English as a tool to communicate with the world, a lot of students that have the economical and temporal opportunities travel abroad. And there's obviously two types of trips you can do in English-speaking countries. The first one is tourism, as most of us like to do. We like to go to Disney, and we like to go to Miami beaches, and we like to visit Hollywood. And the second option for those students who like to travel abroad is an exchange program. Okay, so let's say we have these two students, and the first one travels abroad and goes sightseeing and goes to different states and goes to different landscapes. And the second student goes to an exchange program when he's an entire month going to his university dorm and going to his classes and going to his library and going to the same old place where he has breakfast. Traditional schooling and traditional mindset of English teaching would suggest that this student that goes through a variety of landscapes, a variety of situations, a variety of problems during his touristic trip will have a more nurturous experience acquiring the language. But that is not true. And that is why exchange programs are so successful. The fact is that when this student that spends an entire month in his exchange program goes every day to the same place to have breakfast, goes every day to the same library where he has to fight with this old lady that doesn't find the book he wants, and every day he asks for the book, and every day this old lady doesn't know where to find it, and every day he has to tell her, look, I know it's in the shelf B13, so please go and get it. And every day he goes with this teacher that asks him these types of questions, circumscribed to a certain discipline. That student will be exposed to the same problems over and over again with the sufficient frequency that he will never forget the tools he needed to survive those moments. On the other side, if I went to Disney and some guy cut in line for this game I was trying to go, and I obviously didn't agree that he did that, and I started arguing with him, well, that's a once in a lifetime situation. And those are okay. And those obviously help us learn the language, but they are not the once in a lifetime experiences are not the most productive experiences to learn and to acquire an ability that has the cognitive conditions that the language has. The same as driving, the same as riding a bike, the same as joggling. So that's the first answer. The second answer is much more intimate and much more psychosocial, one might say. And it's like a chain of phenomena, a very interesting phenomena that occur when we repeat our program. I don't know how many of you have kids, but when I had my kid, the doctor said that one of the most important things I could give him as a present for his life and his upbringing is a routine. Because if I gave him a routine, I would give him predictability. If I gave him predictability, I would produce confidence. And if I produce confidence, I would produce enough boldness to let him go out and explore the world and learn from it. When we, especially with small kids, when we let them know that what comes next won't be always a surprise, and that in Vivadí they should know what will come next, and they should help us to create what will come next, we will help them feel comfortable, and we will help them gain confidence. When kids are small and they do something they saw us do, and they try to do it correctly, and we congratulate them, their heart fills with joy. And it's very important for the development of their mind to feel that they are standing in firm ground. If I go out of my house every day in different time schedules, and if I leave my house for different periods of time, my son never knows when he's going to see me. And if he doesn't know, he's afraid of change. He's afraid of what may happen. And if I don't give that confidence to him, he will be afraid whenever he tries to enter his kindergarten, because he doesn't know when he's going to see me again. If that happens, believe me, he won't be paying much attention of what will be happening inside his classroom. He won't feel safe to play. He won't feel safe to learn. He won't feel safe to connect with the world that surrounds him. If I give him that safety, he will feel that he can do it with tranquility, because he knows that eventually, when that moment ends, he will open the door and his father will be right next to him. Believe it or not, those type of mnemic fingerprints that we leave in our children's psyche are fundamental to achieve the confidence needed to learn anything. That's why in Vivadí we appeal to that confidence, and we need our teachers to produce that confidence. That's why we repeat our structures, and that's why we repeat our activities, because we need to create an environment in which children feel safe and confident to develop the boldness, el atrevimiento that is needed to explore the world and to explore, obviously, English. I have a last question. I don't want to take much more of your time, and I want to leave some time for your questions. Why don't we have a strict calendar? And that I know it's your nightmare as school administrators and as people who have to give grades to your children. We're sorry, but we believe in this, and we believe in our convictions, and I don't know, give us a chance to explain. It needs a little bit of history. When the school was first founded 450 years ago, inspired in Comenius's vision of what a school should be, this Czechoslovakian thinker. It was an era that was called by many authors as the corporation of teachers. where a school was what a teacher decided that school should be. They were all rural schools. They had like 6 students, 11 students, 20 students at tops. And the teacher decided the curriculum, and he decided how to follow each student's trajectory. And he had the time. He had the time, he had the patience, and he had the tools, and he had the family support to, I don't know, be with each and every student, because they were so few, and to evaluate when that student was ready to pass to the next, to go to the next level. Then cities were created, and all the families moved into the cities. We know how history goes. And the state decided that it had to create something to keep the kids out of the factories, because it wasn't legal for them to work, and a place where they could be safe and not wandering about acting mischiefully in the city centers and stealing bread and fruit and, I don't know, killing horses. And so they created the education system. One of the main things they had to do to make of schools an entire system that could take thousands and thousands and thousands of students was to introduce something that is called simultaneous instruction. Simultaneous instruction is that in order to keep the class in order, and in order to create an homogeneous society that could function, that could work peacefully one another, erasing migrant differences, was to produce simultaneous instruction. This means every kid has to learn the same thing at the same time. And this worked, and it was very interesting for a certain period of time. Entire nations were able to be created because of this process, because we created a national culture, we created a national language, we created a national way of working. But that doesn't serve us any good today, because we have entered an era where we understand that every person is unique, and that every person needs to go through their own path, and every person has a proper value that needs to be recognized, that needs to be connected with its full potential and sense of transcendence. So Vivadí proposes itself to break simultaneous instruction. That's what it does. And a lot of the gestores asked me, okay, but what would I tell the parents when they have 2 kids and one is in cycle 2 and one is in cycle 3? And the answer is simple. Today, or a couple of decades ago, the only schools that could have the luxury of having a teacher paying attention to each and every individual trajectory, educational trajectory, were only the elite schools. Only schools that cost millions and millions of dollars. Only schools where there is no poverty, there is no social diversity. Today, we have the opportunity to provide to your kids, in the context of diversity, in the context of the real life, a life we want our children to be exposed to, a one-on-one, almost a one-on-one supervision of educational trajectories. So to the parent that asks you, you can tell them, you have the luxury to be sending your kid to a school that actually pays attention not on what date it is on the end of the trimester or the semester or the year or the quarter year, but that pays attention to actually how my kid is doing. How is he or she doing? And what will it take for them, specifically them, to go to the next level, to pass to the next cycle? Sometimes it's hard to understand, but it's kind of simple to explain. And I suggest you use this same boldness to talk with your families and with your parents. They need to feel that they're sending their kids, the most precious thing they have, to a school that pays attention to them, and that has certainty, and that feels secure of the pedagogical decisions they have taken. Once they have that feeling, I probably would say that they will stop asking so many questions, because they are sure that they send their kids to a school that basically knows what they're doing. So that's all for me. I imagine some of you have some type of question. I would like to leave some space for you to, ask whatever you want, and I'll try humbly to answer. Okay, I must have been more clear than I thought. Was it okay? Was it nice?
Yes, Pablo, it was great. Agora a gente poderia voltar para português para fazer alguma dúvida, para fazer algum comentário sobre isso. Você tem aberto aí o microfone se quer falar. Ou podem levantar a mão diretamente. Acho que aí Bruna está conectando o auricular. É isso. Bem, tranquilo. Se a galera não tem dúvidas ainda, podemos fechar aí e ver se tem alguma dúvida para a próxima.
Y por supuesto que todos nós estamos disponibles para cualquier momento poder falar, y si a dúvida acontece más adelante, podem ligar com nós e a gente vai falar com a melhor predisposição.
Perfeito. Bom, então, Pablo, muitas gracias e obrigado, como se fala em português, por este desarrollo conceptual, con convenio, con toda a filosofía. Estoy entusiasmado a ver lo que acontece con la Bruna ahí en su escuela, con cada uno de los docentes que van a comenzar ahora. Así que buena noche para todos, y a gente está aquí disponible para contestar cualquier duda. Perfecto. Chao, chao.